You're joining me today with Nick Gelso from CLNS on the YouTube channel for CLNS Media and on Almighty Baller Radio. Thanks for joining us, viewers and Nick.
Thanks for having me, Chris. This is great.
Yeah, well,
fun stuff.
I think why it's really great, too, is because you're, of course, from the Celtics market. CLNS started out in Boston. Now you're not just doing Boston sports, not just doing Celtics, doing everything. But I think there's a special place in your heart. And now there's a special new point guard in your heart named Kyrie Irving. I texted you right away. You seemed pretty overwhelmed at the time. Where are you right now?
I like the trade. I'm feeling good about where it leaves the Celtics. I think Isaiah, I love him. Let's make that straight. I think the fans in Boston absolutely love what this guy did. His heart, he was a Celtic through and through, and a great face of the franchise in a transitional period. But I think Isaiah has a shelf life. I mean, obviously, probably the medical staff knows a bit more about the injury than we do, although he has to clear waiver. He has to clear the physical anyway. So he's got to be healthy to a certain degree, at least to pass physical. But also, Isaiah has made it overtly clear with the whole Brinks truck.
Right, yeah.
I mean, to me, I heard that and there's been a couple times over the last couple seasons I've heard Isaiah say some things, and I'm like, oh, that's great, man.
All right, okay, go ahead.
No, I mean,
it's a Shiba Inu. Yeah.
Wow, that's a handful.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, there's been a couple times where Isaiah has said some things that I'm like, oh no. The Brinks truck I thought was a bit
especially in the context of the back injury, right? Because there's of course the stuff with he's a diminutive guard. Right. They tend to not have good shelf life, to borrow your terminology. Right. But then, I mean, a back injury that has killed players better than Isaiah Thomas. I mean, Dwight Howard pretty much went overnight from being
Larry Bird.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. The Celtics have seen it firsthand. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I thought that the Celtics would probably be looking to move on from Isaiah Thomas, even though I think you're right. He really represented something special to the Celtics. The fact that he, buried his sister and went out and played a game. I think, he's going to get a standing ovation easily. Right.
Easily.
But in the end, it was Danny Ainge's call whether or not to move him. And what he's worried about is winning basketball games. And
he's worried about the future of the franchise.
Right.
And to have kept Isaiah, listen, here's what it comes down to. Danny Ainge was not paying Isaiah nearly the supermax. He wasn't paying him the max.
Right.
Isaiah was probably not willing to accept that because he's been a great, like we said, a great leader, a great culture guy. But Danny Ainge is a businessman, and he knows what he can afford. I don't believe he wanted to lock up Isaiah Thomas for several years on max dollars when they're a team that really is still on a two-prong rebuild, right? They got the youngs, and then they got the veterans, which are still quite young, by the way. So I think it was a matter of what was best for the Celtics. And really, honestly, I think Cleveland looks at the situation like, okay, LeBron is leaving next year. Isaiah has already proven he's a great face of a franchise. He knows how to put butts in the seats, and he's an exciting, fun player to watch. I mean, I won't even get into it, but like what I saw last season, both in person and on television, was otherworldly what Isaiah was doing.
Right.
So he knows he's an exciting, dynamic player. And I think he's going to play well with LeBron. But once LeBron is gone, they got the 2018 pick. They got Jay Crowder's terrific contract. And if they could get Isaiah to stick around, and I believe Cleveland will probably pay him close to max dollars, they got a new face of the franchise, which allows them to transition from the LeBron era a little bit easier.
Yeah, do you think that how much they pay Isaiah Thomas is going to depend on whether LeBron stays? Because
I think LeBron's not staying.
Right. So,
I mean, do you honestly think LeBron is staying?
Frankly, no. I think there's no way.
There's no way. I mean, everybody was trashing Kyrie for, that broke on CLNS on Coach Nick's show with Dave McMenamin, where he had said that Kyrie had not spoken to the team through the second round in the EEC finals.
Right. Yeah.
His teammates. Right around that same time, LeBron, and don't let anybody kid you, LeBron was leaking his own rumors about leaving next season. So, Matt, put yourself in Kyrie's shoes, and I hear a lot of people saying he's not a good locker room guy because of this. And truthfully, I give the guy credit. He's got guts to put his foot down and say, I started with this team in purgatory when LeBron was with Miami. You brought LeBron back. I became the number 2. And now I'm sitting here on pins and needles until LeBron decides what he wants to do, which he's made overtly clear through leaking it through the media that he's out of there. So I think from the Kyrie standpoint, he made the right move that's best for him, his career, and his personal life.
Yeah, and I think that's a big aspect of things is that it was right for him. And I think that people want to look at the situation and say, well, winning basketball, winning championships, that's got to be the most important thing to Kyrie or else he's not a winner. Right. But I mean, these are people. They have complex lives. There are things going on, like Dwayne Wade's wife. She probably doesn't want to be in Chicago. So now he took his kids out. They're going to school in Miami. We'll see what happens there. But there are all these different variables in play in these people's lives. And
don't forget that.
But basketball fans just look at it as like, well, does this make sense for a basketball player when does this make sense for a human? And I mean, you just ran through 15 different reasons. McManaman's talked about it on Nick's show, but really Windhurst has talked about it. Yeah,
Chris Sheridan broke it in 2010. He broke it when LeBron went back to Miami, and just 2 or 3 days before the Kyrie trade, Chris Sheridan, sources say LeBron leaving Cleveland.
That locker room has to be toxic. That can't be a fun work environment.
Not only that, I mean, you're defending EC champions. Actually, last year defending champions, right? So they go to the NBA Finals. They lost, but I don't know too many teams that clean house in their front office after getting to the NBA Finals. And then I don't know too many contending teams with the best player in the world on them, or best top 1-2 player that can't find a replacement for a GM in the front office. So I think there's a lot more going on in Cleveland than any of us know. And I give Kyrie a lot of credit, not just because he's coming to the Celtics. I give him a lot of credit because he had the guts to say, I'm not going through this again. I mean, it's pretty unlikely that team as constructed can beat the Warriors. Yes, they probably could get back to the NBA Finals. I think that with Kyrie on Cleveland, and if the deal didn't happen, Cleveland, maybe with Gordon Hayward on the Celtics, they take Cleveland 6 games, maybe 7.
Yeah.
But Cleveland still advances. But after all that, Kyrie comes back next season to a brand new team and rebuilds. At this point, he's 25 years old. He could go to a team that has the brightest future, one of the brightest futures in the NBA, one of the best and most respected coaches in the NBA, and one of the most feared front offices in the NBA because
for good reason. He's
the modern
bloodthirsty. He's a vampire.
He's the modern day Red Auerbach. That's who he is. So, in my opinion, I mean, I'm babbling on here, but I think it's a good move for Kyrie, and I believe it's a good move as hard as it is to say goodbye to Isaiah. I think for Isaiah's career, it's a good move for him as well.
So we talked a little bit about Danny Ainge, or you referenced there that Danny Ainge is, he's out for blood, right? He traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and part of the reason why I figured that this was going to happen, it sounds like we're probably going to talk about this next week too. I think it makes a ton of sense just on an X's and O's level as far as what the Celtics are going to roll out every game. I think that Kyrie basically, Isaiah Thomas just finished having this incredible career season, right? Mm-hmm. He was a pretty good player before then, right? If you believe that breakout that Isaiah Thomas had is in large part because of Brad Stevens' coaching, then you have to believe at the same time that if you put an even better player like Kyrie in Isaiah Thomas's position, he'll take another step forward. And Kyrie taking a step forward is different from Sacramento Kings Isaiah Thomas taking a step forward. So
that's a really good point. And I think to add to what you're saying, or maybe deep dive a little more, I think you're going to see Kyrie suddenly start to play a little defense. I really do. Brad Stevens is a motivator.
Maybe.
Listen, Kyrie's not a bad defensive player. He doesn't give it the effort. That's my feeling on it. He's not a high effort guy on defense.
I feel like, don't you agree though? Even if he does step up his defensive effort, the Celtics don't really have a center. That they don't have like a Rudy Gobert.
They don't believe in positions.
Well, I guess Brad Stevens has said, well, you need, there are wings and then there are ball handlers and then there are centers or rim protectors or big men, I think is what he said. Mm-hmm. They don't have big men then. And like, if Isaiah Thomas wasn't part of the Celtics' long-term plans, Al Horford can't be either. So we'll see what happens there.
But that's a little foreshadowing.
Yeah, right.
I don't see Al Horford going anywhere unless it's to bring in an Anthony Davis type character. Not saying that they could trade straight up for that. They clearly can't.
Right.
But if Danny Ainge, I mean, we had the conference call on, it's on the YouTube channel. We had it on the night of the trade. And Danny Ainge was as obvious as Danny gets, being cryptic at the same time, saying he's still not done. So,
No, that was not super surprising to me.
No, and if they're going to go after a guy like Davis or any of what's left of dominant big men in the NBA, the only real assets they have are Al, right? And I don't think he's going to part with Brown or Tatum. I mean, Smart's been so devalued. Marcus Smart has to have a really good year this year. It's a contract year for him. He's coming out of the rookie deal. And I think thus far, the overall consensus is that he's been underwhelming, even though he's been such a good defensive player. The offensive deficiencies.
He shot 28% from three. I mean,
now I will say this. He's an extremely underrated ball handler, which I think is another reason why you'll still see him come off the bench. Marcus Smart is a great passer. He sets people up perfectly. And when he penetrates, he could get to the line because he's so strong. Now he's just got to learn how to hit free throws. So, there's some really overt issues with his offensive game.
Well, if I'm looking at this team and the way that they want to play with their spread offense and no positions, I mean, they last year had the only like big men that they played. Kelly Olynyk shoots threes, Al Horford shoots threes. In the modern NBA, you need to shoot threes, and if you're Marcus Smart, you can't hit at least minimum 33% of your threes. Yeah. You're not an NBA starter, maybe not an NBA player. Right. I mean, that's just sort of the bottom line, I think.
Definitely not a starter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
although he's done great in starting roles when he spelled Isaiah, when Isaiah's had the injury through the regular season, when Isaiah was out with the injury. Marcus is kind of like an anomaly to me because on big games, he hits threes, he hits big shots, and then, there's just random nights during the regular season where he's just he'll launch a three and you could hear the whole garden go, oh, because it's almost like you don't want it to go in because then he's going to start chucking them up from everywhere.
Right.
But his defense compensates for that. And the Celtics lost one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA in Avery Bradley. So they need that. They need Marcus Smart to be able to play defense, especially with Kyrie not being a tremendous defensive player.
Yeah, no, and I think that sort of gets down to it. They lost Avery Bradley. Interesting impact if you look at the analytics, but I mean, every coach, every player in the league will say this guy is a dog defensively. He'll shut a guy down, but still, it's not like the Celtics were the best defense in the league. And that's where I think it kind of comes down to, well, who's going to be the big man in this future Celtics lineup? And to me, that's actually the most interesting part of the trade is I think that for the second time in Danny Ainge's career, he's made a big gamble on the Nets either being good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. Originally, he gambled on them being bad, very, very, very bad. The worst team in the league, and it worked out. I think now, basically, this trade is a gamble that, I'll tell you, Nick, I'm not sure if you're an NBA draft guy. There are 5 big men, all going to be selected top 5 in this next NBA draft. Yep. And there's no way that Danny Ainge gives up this draft pick, the Nets pick, if he thinks the Nets are going to be top 5. I just don't.
I don't think the Nets are going to be top 5, but I do think Lakers may be top 5.
Right. Well, he kept that pick.
That's what's ironic here, right? So the overall, first of all, the trade in the draft this past year for Tatum and Fultz, that Lakers pick was crucial. Mm-hmm. I think Danny, and I'm not in Danny's office with him, but I think that Danny Ainge was sensing, obviously any astute NBA guy is sensing that the Nets are now coming out of hell, basketball hell. Right. They're starting to get a little bit better.
I think they got a lot better.
Yeah, they did, but I don't think they're an 8th seed. I was just watching NBA TV, and Mike Fratello had them as an 8th seed. I hope they are at this point, but I don't think they
You know what I've said is there's no NBA team in history that is bad enough to not be considered for the 8th seed this year. There are 7 teams in the East that are okay, and then 8 awful teams. It's some awful team is going to make the playoffs this year in the East.
And it could be the Nets. And
right.
So I think Danny Ainge looks at the Lakers pick as either being the equivalent or even maybe a step above what is left of the Nets picks. Right. Yeah. So, and you're right. It's a big man draft this year. The NBA, I can't wait for that because the NBA is so devoid of big men at this point that it's a small man's game. So the other side is, and flipping back a little bit, I'm not saying that Morris is the end all be all, but he certainly he could shoot. You know, he's a good spot up shooter. I think he averaged like 14 a game last year. He brings some. It's
like Jay Crowder light.
Exactly. He brings some toughness to the team. He pretty much made Jay a bit more expendable. Jay's greatest asset was off the court was his contract. Mm-hmm. But he made Jay expendable, and Jay wasn't happy last year. He's not going to be happy this year in Boston. So, you know, you got Marcus Morris in there, and then I think Baines is going to bring some real toughness to the Celtics front line. He's a bruiser. Listen, I don't know that, and I see your facial expression. I don't know that he's going to play 20 minutes a game. He may only play 5, right?
Right.
But I think he'll have 5 impactful minutes where he could grab some boards, rough some people up, and use some of his fouls to not have the Celtics be perceived so much as a finesse team, which I think hurt them a lot over the past 2 seasons.
Who's the big man you guys gave up to the 70? Or you guys that the Celtics gave up to the 76ers this year? Yeah. There's he's like 30-year-old.
To the Sixers.
He was on the Raptors before he went to the Celtics.
I thought he went back to
Amir
Johnson.
Right, yeah.
Amir Johnson. I thought he went back to the Raptors. He went to the
Sixers on like a JJ Redick style, like 1-year big contract. People wondered why he was starting and why he was playing a lot of minutes. He sets great picks. And I got to think that's the reason why they brought in your guy who, I mean, I'm not sure
if I call him my guy.
Yeah,
you know, but I guess not. I think he could set a pick. He's a big man. Amir, I don't think it mattered who started because usually, especially towards the end of the season in the playoffs, Amir would play the first 4 minutes of the game and then he'd sit on the bench for a good quarter or two, and then you'd see him at the start of the third quarter. So I don't think Amir's a huge loss. He never really materialized into the great locker room guy that he was reported to be with Toronto, and I'm sure he was with Toronto. Just with Boston, he never really, from an exterior standpoint, it felt like he never really felt at home. Could be true, maybe not. So losing Amir, I mean, I honestly, like I said, I think Baines or Morris are the equivalent almost. And the Morris situation is he could shoot. I mean, he's not a knockdown 3-point shooter, but he could shoot 20 plus feet out. He's not going to spread the floor like Kelly Olynyk, but he's definitely going to be able to open the floor a little bit and then be tough and do things that Kelly didn't do.
Yeah.
Again, Kelly's a finesse player.
So I guess that makes him, you know, sort of a blend of replacing Kelly Olynyk and Jay Crowder, where he's a little bigger than Jay, a little less good from deep.
Less versatile.
Yeah, a little less versatile. But, I mean, I think the bottom line is that if you roll back this season with all of the same wings, the same basically wing crunch that you had last year, except all you're doing is adding Jason Tatum now to the fold too and Marcus Morris, then someone's going to be wanting for minutes. And if you're not getting enough minutes, you're not increasing your trade value. And if that was going to be Jay Crowder, then yeah, I definitely think that in this trade he gets undervalued. But I mean, if you trade him a year from now and he's only playing 20 minutes a game, then he's probably about adequately rated as far as trade value, right?
Yeah, I mean, his skill set is a hot commodity in the NBA. I mean, he's a versatile swing man who could spread the floor and plays defense on multiple positions, and he's grossly underpaid. So no matter what, Jay along with Jay's contract was valuable.
Right.
But let's face it, Jay Crowder is a seventh man on a championship team. Jay Crowder doesn't think that. I think that's part of his problem is he has unrealistic
Right.
perception of whatever. But yeah, so Jay going, I don't know if it was under discussed. I mean, I think that's a big part of that. Let's put it this way. I think two years ago, Jay Crowder, and I may be wrong here, but I think Jay Crowder was the sticking point in getting Butler 2 years ago in the Jaylen Brown draft.
Yeah.
I think that the Bulls were demanding Jay, and Danny wouldn't give him up. But Jay, from 2 years ago to last season, after he got that high ankle sprain.
Yeah, he wasn't a defensive player. Yeah.
He never really came back the way that he was. And what also, Jay is a huge energy guy, and that's so much. And if he's not playing well because he's doesn't have the mobility he once did, and he's not showing the energy, at that point, I don't know, you know. And he's also not saying causing problems in the locker room, but there's some tension in the locker room because he feels he's better than Gordon Hayward, which is hilarious. At that point, I thought Jay was gone by the trade deadline. Anyway, frankly, Chris, and I'm quoted on multiple podcasts, I never thought Isaiah Thomas was making it past the trade deadline.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't disagree. When the whole Kyrie news break that he was asking for an out from Cleveland, I recorded, that night, like so many others, and the team that I said it made sense for him to go to was the Celtics, because I agree. I think Isaiah Thomas, especially with the back injury stuff, I think that's underrated. I think that something to watch here now is he hasn't had his physical yet. I think he's having it this weekend in Cleveland. We'll see what comes back from that. He
already had his physical in Boston, and I know the two doctors consulted. So now it's just a matter of, how maybe Cleveland will find something different, but I think it's almost a semantics at this point. Or
well, I mean, he was I guess, like, it was half the case that he should have surgery and half the case that he shouldn't. So because, of the Brink truck situation, he wants to make a ton of money on his next contract, didn't want to miss a bunch of games. He opted not to have surgery, which long-term probably would have been better in terms of his health, but he would have missed a bunch of games this season, definitely hurt his trade value. So I understand. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I understand why he didn't want to do that, but then now you don't make you make even less sense for the Celtics long-term, and Kyrie, to me, there's that impact. And I guess we're going to be talking about that next week. And
yeah, I can't wait, man. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, no,
once a week, dude.
I can't wait to see. I can't wait to talk about this next week, right? But I also can't wait to see the crazy things that Brad Stevens is going to do with this guy, Kyrie.
Yeah.
Because I buy the Brad Stevens hype. I think he's every bit the genius that he was. I got into some trouble as much as Isaiah Thomas is like this great guard, and he had one of the best seasons that a guard has ever had. I think you can maybe split that 50-50 with Brad Stevens. I think he doesn't have that season.
No. Yeah. I think maybe you put 35 on Brad Stevens. You put 20. No, wait a minute. Now everybody else is contributing more than Isaiah. Here's the thing. I want to give, I guess I'm not going to go into the math here. I want to give Al Horford a tremendous amount of credit in Isaiah's boom from 2 years ago to last year. And you talked about Amir setting picks. Al Horford may not be the best pick setter, but you need to guard him on the roll or on the pop. So
I think he was a great pick setter. I think that really made the Celtics really breathe on offense. I think
it did well, and he spread the court. I mean, he could pop out, and not only that, he allowed Isaiah to really penetrate. I mean, Al Horford and Brad Stevens may share that 50%. Let's put it that way. And I guess we'll wrap with this, right? I mean, but that is, NBA fans, casual Celtics fans will look at the box score and say, Al Horford, we're paying him too much money. He's not filling out the box score. Because everything that he does, and in the playoffs he did, but everything he does during the regular season may not be trackable, maybe an intangible, but it's absolutely helping his teammates. And Al Horford, to me, last year, as much as Isaiah was the MVP, Al was probably the co-MVP because he was a calming force in the locker room, calming force on the court, and he made everybody around him better. He's a tremendous, tremendous passer, and he's just got a high basketball IQ.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that high IQ big man is going to be interesting to see if the Celtics get him. But for now, we'll leave it off there. Nick Gelso from CLNS Media, Chris Axmann from Almighty Baller Radio talking about the Kyrie trade. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everyone who's on the CLNS YouTube channel checking in,
don't forget Celtics
watching this.
Blog.
Oh, yeah, Celtics blog. Yeah, thanks, man. Everyone there, too.
All of a sudden, everybody's going to start thinking you're a Celtics fan. All this praise you're handing the Celtics.
I'm huge.
Now you're on.
I stand for Brad Stevens. I think he's every bit the guy that people think he is. I agree with the move. As long as this wasn't a trade of Brad Stevens, I'm okay with it.
Well, and let's face it, this is a good thing to wrap on.
Right.
Don't think for 1 second that Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, Brad Stevens weren't all okay with this trade.
Right. Yeah.
Danny Ainge sat each of them down and said, this is when, not to say he wouldn't have done it anyway, but he sat each of them down and talked to them. And no question, if Brad did not want to pull the trigger on this trade, it would not have happened. So everybody's on board with this. And Celtics Nation, upset about Isaiah, understandable. I am too. But let's look towards the future because the Celtics have now 2 all-star players that are budding superstars.
Right.
And a super future that is bright and isn't 2 or 3 seasons. It could be the next 10 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, so absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And tune in next week. Yeah. It's good talking to you.
Great.
Good talking basketball.
Yeah. Talking hoops instead of business for once, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.